GameSci.com. GameSci.com.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to PHP Cookies. In this lesson, we're going to study client-server architecture, where client-browser is connected to the internet to a server or Apache program. What we're going to study first is something called the headers. Number one, the header. The client requests the server run a PHP program and maybe send some CGI form data, and HTML is returned to the browser for display. With this header statement, HTML will be returned to the browser for the browser to display it. With the number 2 header, right here, the client asks the server to run a PHP program, and this time a JPEG image is returned to the browser for display. This header, which is sent back to the client, is telling it, expect to see a JPEG in my return data. The third header here, content type application/JSON, this is coming soon. JSON data will be returned to the browser for processing or display. Finally, the fourth header right here, set cookie, game equals hello. This is cookies. When the request/HTML is exchanged, small amounts of data called cookies are passed back and forth between the client and the server. Headers are very much a two-way street. Headers are sent to the server, and then headers are sent from the server back to the browser. PHP cookies. Cookies are small files stored on the browser computer. HTML or web pages have no memory. Cookies provide a small amount of memory. Cookies are tied to the URL. GameSci.com sends a cookie. It should only be transferred back and forth to and from GameSci.com. But the client can easily see, change, delete, or disable cookies, so never, ever use them for passwords, credit cards, or any other important secure data. Call the setCookie function. Ask the browser to store the cookie on the browser hard drive. Return the information game equals hello to the server with each subsequent time the browser contacts the server. For an e-commerce site, we want to be reminded the user is interested in Halo, so the site can suggest additional related products for sale to the user. If you follow my arrows here, when setCookie is called, it's the server sending a header to the browser asking it to store game equals hello on the browser computer. This is the server telling the browser, please store this data. Header, setCookie game equals hello. setCookie is better than this. You can set the same cookie using the header function. I've included it here so that you understand that cookies are sent back and forth in the header when data is exchanged between the client and the server. But setCookie is a way better way to do this in PHP. By the way, cookies are language, browser, and operating system independent. They are part of the HTTP protocol. So setCookie is the preferred way to do it in PHP, but understand that cookies are sent in the headers that are exchanged back and forth between the client and the server. setCookie plat, which is short for platform, Xbox. Where is the cookie stored? They're stored in files on the browser computer. Data sent from the server and stored on the client's hard drive. We are asking the client to store a small amount of data so they can send it back to us the next time the client and server talk. This is memory. I want to know every time you send me a message what is in the cookies. Note how the data is stored in name-value pairs, very similar to how CGI data is sent in name-value pairs. Follow this arrow. This is the server executing setCookie. The server is asking the browser store plat equals Xbox in your cookie memory. setCookie rate, teen And we'll add a third parameter, time plus 864000. What's going on here? Keep this cookie for 10 days on the browser computer. The third parameter is the current time plus the number of seconds in 10 days. Cookies, like the tasty ones in my kitchen, don't stay around for long. With no third parameter, it's called a session cookie and will only exist as long as the browser is running. Game and plat will be deleted when the browser exits, but rate will stay around on the hard drive for 10 days. If you want a cookie to stay around on the browser hard drive for multiple days, you have to add this third parameter. Follow the arrow. Rate equals teen is being stored on the browser computer. How did it get there? Set cookie executing on the server sent a header message to the browser asking it to keep this data in the cookie. Furthermore, it asked it to store it for 10 days. Anytime during the next 10 days, when this server and client talk, that information will be transferred back to the server. This is a separator line between two different programs. Once again, I'm short on space. There would be code after this to generate HTML. When the reply to the client/browser is sent, the header with the cookies is sent followed by the HTML and the program exits normally. The cookies are saved under the domain name. Example, www.gamesci.com, so that the next time the server is accessed, guess what happens? This data stored on the client isn't sent everywhere. It's only sent back to the server that stored it there. This is a different program running. The next time a PHP program is run by the same client, let's see what happens. At some point, the browser user will click on a link or submit a form, and when they do, the cookies will be added to the header sent to the server. When the server receives the request, it will take the cookies in the header and load the $_cookie associative array. This is automatic. Before the first line of PHP executes, just like CGI data is put into $_get or $_post, the cookie data is put in $_cookie. Let's follow the arrows and see what's happening here. The client sends a request to the server. When it sends that request, it adds this cookie data in the header sent to the server. When the server receives the request, it sees the cookie data and boom, loads the cookies into the $_cookie array. This is automatic. It's done every time the browser contacts the server when it has cookies to share. Echo, I see you like to play, and we'll access the cookie game on your, and then we'll access the cookie plat. A simple echo to output with the values from the cookies that are stored on the browser's hard drive. The data in $_cookie is stored in name value or key value pairs, just like with CGI data from a form. Plat is short for platform. Examples of platforms are Xbox, PC, Nintendo, PlayStation. From an e-commerce standpoint, you want to match the products displayed with the system the player owns. You don't want to try and sell Nintendo cartridge to a PC gamer. Follow the arrows. The data from the cookie array is sent through the echo command out to the screen, and you can see we substitute in the cookie for game is Halo and the cookie for platform is Xbox. If $_cookie of rate equals teen, use the cookie to determine what is sent back to the user. Alter the execution of the program based on the cookie. How did Amazon become so big? By matching what product they display to what the customer is most likely to buy. How'd they do it? They used cookies and their database to match those products. Don't try to sell a Nintendo cartridge to a customer with an Xbox. Don't display mature titles to a child. You want to match what you show to the customer, what they like to buy, and what they're allowed to buy. Echo 13 or older to buy this game. Customize, customize, customize. That is the advantage of using PHP, cookies, and MySQL to generate a web page with the products and messages tailored to the user. By the way, rate is short for rating. The rating is used to match the games to the age of the customer. The game equals hello is used to suggest similar games the customer might like. It's all about showing the customer what they want. If a person likes first-person shooter games, you want to make sure that you output first-person shooters to them. If a person likes fantasy games, you want to output fantasy games to that customer. That is how you make money on the internet. Cookies are sent back and forth in the HTTP header of the messages that go between the server and the client. Headers are a two-lane highway. The server sends a reply to the client asking it to store cookies on the browser's hard drive. And then the browser sends the header containing said cookies when it sends the next request to the server. It is short-term, non-secure memory for a web page. Again, never use cookies to store things like passwords or credit card information. Any data stored on the client's computer is not secure. PHP sessions. Client-server architecture. Cookie variables are stored on the browser's hard drive and are sent to the server when the client executes a PHP program. Session variables are stored on the server and maintain values for each unique client as long as they do not exit the browser. Sessions are like sticky notes. The client can run a PHP program 2, 5, or 100 times, and the variables will be there every time. But if the client exits the browser, poof, the session variables disappear. PHP session. Cookie versus session. Clearly the big difference. Cookies are stored on the client/browser. Session variables are stored on the server. Maybe the hard drive, maybe not. It depends on the server. Cookies can exist for days after the client shut down, after the browser exits. However, session variables always expire when the client/browser exits. Ironically, cookies that expire after the browser exits are called session cookies. Session variables are often used to track user logon, and it's active as long as the user does not log off or exit the browser. A session is defined as one connection between the client and browser. If either side should disconnect, the session is over. Session start must be called at the top of the program. It establishes a unique ID between the server and the client browser. As long as the same browser instance evokes PHP programs on the server, this ID will be the same, even for different browser tabs. However, if the user should exit the browser on the client, the ID is lost. If the user opens a different browser, let's say goes from Chrome to Firefox, the ID will not be the same. This is the connection between one browser instance and the server. You can see that when a session is started, a unique ID is stored on the server, identifying that connection with the browser. Print session ID is, and call the session ID function. A simple print statement, printing the ID of the connection between the browser and the server. I'm guessing here, but I think the browser sent some identifying information to the server used to create the session ID. As long as the same browser sends the same identifying information to the server, it will create the same ID every time the browser runs a PHP program. This will allow the server to set the session variable. As soon as the browser exits, the ID will be changed and the session is lost. Following the arrow, the session ID stored on the server is printed to our output. $_session, the key of user, equals the value Fred. When a session variable is created, it stores the name value in the $session associative array. But the server also stores it, so in future connections that generate the same ID, we will be able to restore the $session array. Clearly this is stored in local memory, our $_session. But it is also stored on the server with the ID for that session. $_session, key of level, value of 3. When a session variable is created, it stores the key/value in the $_session associative array. But the server also stores it, so on future connections that generate the same ID, we will be able to restore the $_session array. It's stored both in $session and on the server underneath the ID for that session. $_session, name paid equals value true. When a session variable is created, it stores the name value in the $session associative array. But the server also stores it, so on future connections that generate the same ID, we will be able to restore the $_session array. Keep it in my local memory of my PHP program and store it on the server so I can restore it at a later point. And of course, the rest of the program would appear here, but also notice that all the data we stored in $session is also stored on the server for future use. Clearly, while this PHP program continues to run, the $_session associative array retains the values stored in it. But all programs eventually exit and all variables in RAM are deleted. However, the server also stores the session variables, so with future connections that generate the same ID, we will be able to restore the $_session associative array. That is memory. When this user comes back to our PHP program, it will remember the variables stored in the session array. Exit this particular program. When the program exits, you can see the $_session array, and frankly, all variables are deleted. They're wiped from memory. Program ends, so do the variables. However, the server also stored the session variables, so future connections that generate the same ID will be able to restore the $_session array. That is memory, folks. Next, run another PHP program. Have the browser request the server to run another PHP program. This is another PHP program on the same server being executed from the same browser as the previous example. Start with the comment to illustrate how nothing happens at the very beginning with the session variables unless or until session start is called. Note the session variables are stored on the server just in case we're going to need them. Execute session start at the beginning of the program. This is technically the first line of code. The comment doesn't count. Whoop, there it is. When the same browser instance connects to the server, even if running a different PHP program or the same one, the server restores the $session associative array. This is memory. A PHP program ran at 10:04 a.m. and saved some data in session variables. When another program ran at 11:27 a.m., the values were restored to the $session array. As long as the user did not exit the browser, the data was saved. If the same browser contacts the server, the session variables are restored. Let's follow the arrows. The browser requested to run this PHP program, so session start executed on the server. In the browser request, it identified who was asking to run the program, and apparently we had a match. The same browser that stored these session variables is now running another PHP program. So the values that were stored on the server were restored to the $_session array. You can see user Fred, level 3, and paid equals true. That is coming from the data stored on the server. This happens automatically when session start is run and the ID matches. Print session ID is, and then call the session ID function. A simple print statement printing the ID of the connection between the browser and the server. The browser sent some identifying information that the server used to create the session ID. When it matches, it will restore the $_session array. You do not need to print this I just did it to show you how the server knows to restore. As soon as a user exits the browser, the ID will change and the session will be lost. But as long as the same browser keeps contacting the same server, it will restore these session variables. Print user dot underscore session with the key of user. Simple print statement verifying dollar underscore session has been restored. This is the variable you might use to determine log on or log off. When dollar underscore session user has a value, the user is logged on. When it's empty or unset, the user is logged off. The dollar underscore session is much better for access control than dollar cookie. Why is that? Security. Cookies are stored on the user's computer. They're easily manipulated. Sessions are stored on the server. It's much harder to manipulate a session variable than a cookie variable. Print level dot dollar score underscore session with the name level. A print statement verifying dollar underscore session level. For a gaming website, this is the type of data you read from a database during logon and place it in a session so you don't have to keep reading the database every time the user contacts the server. What is the difference between dollar underscore cookie and dollar underscore session? Cookies are stored on the browser. Sessions are stored on the server. They're far more secure. This is data that you don't want the user to manipulate, so you store it in a session variable. If dollar underscore session of paid equals true. Use the dollar underscore session paid variable to alter the path of the code. Session variables, like cookies, should customize the web page for each user. When a user on level 1 that has registered for free access signs on, they should see a very different web page than a user on level 3 that has paid for the upgrade to the game. Use the values in the session variables to match the page to the user. It's all about customization, both with cookies and session variables. Print has paid. This only prints when it's a paid user. Dollar underscore cookie. They're stored on the browsers. Cookies are stored over here on the browser. They are less secure, and they can stick around for multiple days, or they can be deleted when the browser exits. It's kind of up to the programmer how long to keep a cookie. Cookies are often used in shopping cart applications. Dollar underscore sessions, well, that's stored on the server. That's information stored right here. These are more secure, but they only stick around until the browser exits. They're often used for logon access control. Both cookies and sessions are great for customizing web pages for the individual users. Now let's exit the current program and run a completely different PHP program. Here we are at the start of the program. Let's run a third PHP program. The first program assigned session variables. When it did, it saved the session variables on the hard drive. The second program was able to read these session variables when they were restored to dollar underscore session. Now for something completely different. When we run this third program, let's see what happens. Execute session start. Whoop, there it ain't. Nothing showed up in the dollar session associative array. Look, it's blank. Why? Could be that the user simply shut down the browser. Then they started a new browser instance and came back to this server. New browser means the session ID does not match the previous session ID, so no data is loaded. If I started running a new browser over here on the client side, when I contacted the server, it would have sent a brand new session ID. That would not have matched this ID, and with no match, my session variables did not get loaded into dollar underscore session. Could also be a timeout. The server's not going to keep the session variables forever. When the server says, you know what, you haven't contacted me in a long time, I am not going to restore these session variables the next time you contact me. $_session only restores if the same browser contacts the same server, even when it runs different PHP programs. But if the browser changes or the user logs out or the server times out, the session expires and we no longer store the session variables. Now I thought about deleting this information off the server, but it may be that the client just used a different web browser, switch from Chrome to Firefox, and that would not restore these variables. If a Chrome browser stored these session variables, then Firefox contacted the same server, it would not restore the variables. If not is set $_session user. This is the typical way to test if a session has expired. The PHP isSet function returns true if the variable exists. So this line means if $_session user does not exist. And if it doesn't exist, clearly the session does not exist or match. If this is the variable to control logon access, then it is time for the user to log on again to restore the session variables. On previous slides, when we printed the session ID, that was just to explain how the server tracks the user. That wasn't to tell whether you were logged on or not. This is the proper way to determine if a session is active or expired or the user logged off. Print user not logged on. Print a message so the user knows that the session has expired. I could have done a lot more with this example, but this slide has gone on long enough. Just to recap, $_cookie is stored on the browser. Cookies are stored over here on the browser computers. They are less secure. They can stick around for multiple days, or they can be deleted when the browser exits. It's up to the programmer. They're used a lot in shopping cart applications. If you're browsing around a website and saying, buy this, buy this, buy this, it stores that information quite often in cookies. $_session is stored on the server side. More secure than cookies, but they only stick around until the browser exits. They're used a lot in logon access control. Both are great for customizing web pages for individual users, but when looking for a delicious snack, I think cookies are the way to go. Woohoo! Another slide wrapped up. We'll see you on the next lesson. Good night and good luck.